Welcome to episode 367 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Seth Troyer,
Michael O'Malley,
Nazeeh.
And Nazeeh, thank you for joining us. This is your first episode.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here and excited to talk about, what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, fans of Cinematary have probably seen Nazeeh's byline. You've written a number of reviews. You have one up on the site actually right now of O Vigilante. So
Yes. Wonderful, strange Brazilian movie that is on YouTube for anyone to watch if they want to. It's pretty short. I'm a huge proponent of like 90-minute and less movies. I don't mind longer movies, but like short movies are my favorites. So a lot of sweet spots.
That's why you're here on the what is it, hour and 20-minute long
Exactly.
movie
No,
episode.
Exactly. They're short and incomprehensible, and that's a perfect combo.
Well, on today's episode, we got movies that we saw this week in part one, and then in part two, we'll be continuing Young Critics Watch Old Movies with 1969's The Color of Pomegranates, which, as I was telling Nazeeh before we recorded, easily the most unique of the movies that we've seen in this series and probably all of the other Young Critics series. So it's going to be a trip. I'm excited to talk about it, but let's go ahead. I mentioned his review, but we also got reviews of vastly different movies from what we're going to be talking about. But we have Logan Kinney wrote about F9, the latest Fast and Furious movie, and then I have a review up about the second Space Jam movie. Those are both on cinematary.com. If you have not checked that out, head over there. And I know we'll have a new review coming up on Monday, I believe. But let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And Michael, you've had the people waiting. We talked about Tati a few weeks ago, and you've watched through the rest of his stuff. So I'm going to start with you with that. Hold on. Actually, we have mail. I take that back. Sorry, we're gonna put Tati on hold for a second.
Just stay tuned. The listeners will have to wait even longer.
You have to wait, another minute or two. This one comes from longtime listener Ron Hayes. He says, "Hello, Cinematarians. Inspired as always to rewatch old favorites. After your discussions, I happened on a surprising bit of trivia regarding two films you recently featured. Unfortunately, I have a neurotic need to watch all the extras on a DVD. So after enjoying The Apartment, I turned to the Making of featurette and learned that Billy Wilder had gotten the initial idea for the story while watching Brief Encounter. As Noel Coward's story progressed, Wilder found himself musing about the friend who allows his apartment to be used for the weekly liaisons between Trevor Howard and Celia Johnson. What was his story? Wilder wondered. How does he feel about that detail? And 15 years later, he told us. P.S. How come Zach's cat never gets introduced at the beginning of the show? For those who watch the video, he and or she, it's two he's, is a regular. I mean, I don't know. He's sitting over there. It's Gigi. He'll come over in a few minutes. But thank you, Ron, as always, for the letter. All right, Tati.
Thanks, Ron.
Oh man, paying off weeks of build-up. So if you guys who are listening remember, I watched Jour de Fête a few weeks ago for this series. And that was my first of like the mime turned cinematic comedian Jacques Tati's movies that I had seen. And so since I had watched it in like that big old complete Jacques Tati box set, which I had checked out of the library, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and just watch all of them. And so I did. So I'm going to do like a quick run through of the ones that I watched.
Rapid fire.
And, yeah, just rapid fire, because there's like 5 or 6 of them. So the one immediately after Jour de Fête is Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, which is about the introduction of like, I guess his like kind of famous like character, Monsieur Hulot. And he's on holiday at this like beachside kind of quaint village. And I really liked it. It was a lot more what I had expected of Tati. As people point out in the other podcast, Jour de Fête is kind of like this, really rural, parochial setting. And that's true of this movie too, but it's introducing a lot more of like tight gags, and it has a much crisper like visual style where there's a lot more going on in each shot. He's inside this house that he's staying in like the attic of, and it's like a fairly elaborate like setup for like the floor plan and stuff like that, and that kind of pays off in like kind of gentle humor throughout. And then like there's a lot of stuff with the boats and the like just the ocean. And I think like my favorite gag is like Tati's Hulo character is in this boat that it's like a canoe that like is slowly like kind of like doubling up for various reasons, and like by the end he's like encased in the canoe, and it's just like, I don't know, it's fun, like and it's also like a lot more visually engaging than the Jour de Fête. And so for me, like this is finally like, oh okay, it doesn't make me more excited about Jour de Fête, but I can kind of see like the embryonic stages of that. And then next, what he did was a film called Mon Oncle, in which Monsieur Hulot goes and visits his nephew who lives in like the suburbs of Paris, and this is like the 1950s. So it's like this extremely like mid-century modern home with all these like ridiculously specific like electronic devices. There's like this really high-tech kitchen. It's like very like, you know, mid-century sci-fi looking. There's like this water feature in the courtyard of the suburban house that like people can turn on and off depending on who they want to impress. And this one I think is a lot more like explicitly like thematically oriented than the other ones. Like the other ones are fairly like they're mostly like strung together gags, and there's like stuff that you could like pull out as far as like themes, like in Jour de Fête, like the whole like American like progress and speed and efficiency kind of ruining the mailman's job and stuff. But this movie is like very specifically about like this whole like suburban push and the like kind of consumerist like individualism that comes along with that. And like Hulot's character, and I have to assume Tati himself, kind of hate this like really sterile suburban setting with like all these ridiculous appliances and like all these stupid like social mores. And so he's like coming to rescue his nephew and take him off to Paris where it's cool. And I think that like I like this one. Like this one is definitely like continuing the scale up in like terms of visual complexity. The house becomes like a real set piece, and almost the entire movie takes place in the house. Like there's stuff outside of the house, but it definitely like becomes like more of the what I had heard of Tati, which is like, you know, exploring like the absurdities of like mid-century architecture and modernity, and it's doing that. I think like I'm not like super connected with like the themes. Like it's not that they're bad themes, but like when I think of things to criticize about the suburbs, like I'm not super. I mean, the suburbs look like shit, like no kidding. But like, I guess that's not what I have a problem with suburbs, and so it's kind of like, again, like kind of gentle and not like super scathing. But at the same time, it's a lot more pointed, and I guess this like kind of coalesces in like the next movie, which is like the like apex of his career, basically. And as far as I know, it kind of like cost him a lot of money to make because it ended up not being like super successful. And this is Playtime, which takes place like half in this like office building, and then the other half takes place in a club after dark. And this is like the logical conclusion to like the arc of his like filmmaking career, in which he has these like extremely elaborate environments that are like inherently absurd. Like there's cubicles in this office building where there's no door out of the cubicle, so you're just looking at like this whole floor of like dozens and dozens of people who are in like essentially like cubicle cages, and so it almost looks like a beehive or something how they're all laid out. And like the movie's just full of this. Like it really uses this really rich deep focus, so you can see really crisply everything that happens on screen. And you just watch characters just like little like rats in a maze, just like scurrying around these like hyper modern environments. And I thought it was like absolutely mesmerizing. I said this on Letterboxd in my review, but I think that this is actually like not a very funny movie for a movie that has like a reputation as being a comedy. But it kind of doesn't matter because I didn't think his other movies were that funny either. They're just kind of pleasant. And this is like also...
I'd agree with that.
This...
Not that funny, yeah.
You didn't think it's funny either?
Yeah, no, like they are very pleasant. They're not like ha 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 funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
It's
where's
But
it's
Waldo?
you
really
had to
like
have
that.
laughed at least at the gag where with the doorman where the door breaks and then he's holding the thing and then he continues to open
Yeah,
the door,
that
which is
was
an amazing gag.
that was funny. There's also this extended sequence when they're at like it's like a products expo, I guess, where they're like people are selling all these different products that you can put in an office or a modern home. And like they have like these fancy trash cans that look like Roman columns. And I thought that was really funny. But overall, like I guess the appeal of this movie is more so just like looking at it visually and watching like just these really intricate things happen with the visuals. And it's again like not really haha funny. You just these extremely like choreographed character movements through these extremely artificial environments. I just thought was like just it had me riveted. And so
Yeah, I mean it's one also that like at least I've seen it a handful of times now, and it's just kind of like it is a pleasant movie to just like live in for like was it 2 hours long? Yeah, like it's just like a nice like pleasant experience to be in for 2 hours. Now I will say like I've started like I do laugh pretty hard just throughout the whole like the nightclub opening sequence because there are just like you have those levels of gags happening throughout that kind of do set themselves up to be real. You know, you have like the waiters who are like switching the coats. You have like the whole back of the chair is getting stuck on people. You have the person who keeps frying the fish or whatever. But for the different person, then you have like the dance floor keeps breaking. That one, and then you have the whole door thing. That one does entertain me.
The American guy who keeps wanting to like buy
I do like
everybody
that.
everything.
That's pretty funny.
Oh my god.
You know, okay, I'll take it back a little bit because I actually pulled up my Letterboxd review, and I just remembered my favorite gag in the movie is they're in a restaurant and there's air conditioning blowing against a woman's back fat.
that is actually really good.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That
It's just all so absurd, and it just goes, it just keeps going. It's so smart.
The majority of the movie, I'll say, is it's not like there's a lot of like laugh out loud, but I feel like he really comes to bat for the nightclub scene.
I wasn't saying that there's like no jokes whatsoever, but like in a 2 hour movie, which is already fairly long for a comedy, it's like a pretty low count of jokes for even like a 80 or 90 minute comedy. So it's not what I'm like there for, but yeah, every once in a while they pop up and they're good. And then I'll go quickly through the last two because they're kind of, I don't know, like...
I'm really sad that you didn't totally love Traffic, honestly.
You know, I am too. Like, so people may know that I just hate cars. Like, I hate driving. I hate just, like, everything about, roads and all that. Like, I just hate it. And so I saw that his next movie was Traffic, which Zach had already told me was... I think you're going to like this one. And I just really liked Playtime. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. I'm so excited. And I did not like Traffic at all. I thought it was so boring. And I didn't know what was I didn't know what I was supposed to be taking out of it, except that like there's a few points. Like there's a sequence in which like this dude is showing off like his camper, basically like his car like folds out into like a camping gear. And I thought that was really fun. And then there's of course like just scene after scene of like cars driving and like things like just these kind of really complicated like pileups of cars and like all that sort of stuff, and like that's fine. But isn't the end of Playtime like a big car sequence?
Yeah, they're all driving away. Like they get in the tour bus and leave Paris.
Well, yeah, and so like I thought that was really like interesting and cool because they're on like basically like rotating platforms. Like the cars, like they don't even look like they're in motion. They just look like they're kind of turning in concentric circles in Playtime. And so I was like ready for stuff like that, and that didn't really happen. And I realized that like I guess he was probably working with this much smaller budget. It was like a TV movie as opposed to the theatrical release. Like I think it was I don't remember what country, but it wasn't a French TV movie either. And I didn't connect with it at all. I thought it felt structureless, and there wasn't a lot, like the visuals were a lot less crisp. And I just couldn't get into it. Maybe maybe it's a gotta watch it another time thing.
Did you enjoy the whole sequence when they go to the different people and they're all picking their nose in the cars?
Yeah, that was good. That was fun too.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, I love some good nose picking. And then real quickly, because I know I've been going a little long, I'll hit Parade, which is his last movie, real quick, and that's like a super odd movie. So it's stylized like a variety hour. Again, it's a TV movie, which I think was in Sweden or Switzerland, one of those two. And the whole thing is it's like a kind of artificial variety hour in which you get like all these different people doing like acrobatics or singing or different performances. And then Tati himself is kind of like the MC and coming out every once in a while to like introduce the new act or something. And it's pretty meta. I saw someone on Letterboxd compare it to Ingmar Bergman's the Magic Flute, which is another like kind of artificially filmed like stage play in which like there's a big like participatory role for the audience. And I like this actually better than Traffic, although I think it's probably the least liked of his movies, just because it's so weird. He's like experimenting with video as opposed to film stock, and so it's got that like really like early.
I didn't know Tati ever.
This is his last movie, and every once in a while he's like intercutting it with like 35 millimeter too. It's really weird, but it's got that look to it. And then I don't know, like there's like probably like the last 10 minutes of the movie are not even performance. They're them taking down the set after the performance is done, and like these kids are running around just kind of playing with the things that you just saw the professionals like using in the variety hour. And like I don't know, I like that's a really nice like thematic like book shutting moment for like his career, is having like children play with things that like professionals had just done really elaborate things with. I thought that was sweet. It's not like awesome. I thought there was like some dead time in it, but I liked it better than Traffic. And it's like one of those like fun like meta movies to think about like in the context of his career, since it ended up being his last feature film. So in summary, thumbs up on Tati. Some highs, definitely. Some ones that I wish I connected a little bit more with, but overall glad I made the journey.
Like, well, you know, I'm glad you went through them all.
What's your fave out of all of them?
Playtime for sure.
Okay.
And then the ones immediately before Playtime I also really liked.
The one before Playtime?
The two, so like Monsieur Hulot's Holiday and then Mon Oncle. Like both of those were good. Which I guess is like that's like what most people feel, honest. Like I feel like that's the real consensus opinion is Playtime is peak, then you've got the two that were right before Playtime, and then the others you can kind of mix around.
Yeah, I watched Hulot's Holiday over like shutdown, like early into COVID, and it was very like cathartic and kind of depressing because it was like all these people on vacation having like a great time.
And it's a very like communal movie, like they're all like kind of rubbing shoulders with one another and in close proximity, which especially during shutdown was off the table.
Well, I believe if you can probably find the Tati box set from Criterion, but I think those usually pop up on the Criterion channel, and I've even seen Hulo movies, his Hulo movies specifically on like HBO Max. So if you've not seen Tati, there you go.
HBO Max has a very decent selection of like Criterion stuff. It's a shame their interface is just unusable. It's
a terrible interface, but yeah, it's weird because you'll like see like Playtime, and then you'll have like a Ryan Reynolds comedy. Yep. And you're like, what the hell is this?
The range.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people just got like get roped in, just like, I like this Ryan Reynolds comedy.
Yeah, because I watched Free Guy. I'm gonna go check out. Mon Oncle.
It's what happens when like the homogeny of all the studios and all the conglomerate like corporations. So they just like Disney, like that's why it's so weird that Disney has The Simpsons. Like that's still weird to me.
No, that is true.
Like
it is really weird.
And it's like on HBO Max I'll be searching around like in comedies, and you'll have like you'll have like an Adam Sandler movie, and then you'll have like a studio comedy from like the 90s, and then you'll have like one of Chaplin's Tramp movies, and you're like, what the hell? Like, it's just such a like. There's nothing wrong with any of these, but it's just like it's such a weird combo, you know.
If you like to laugh,
yeah,
you'll just keep laughing.
So
in different ways.
No, it is strange. All right, well, Seth, I'm going to toss it over to you. You had two ones you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to talk about 2 Robert Altman movies. Robert Altman is one of my favorite people ever. And like in hindsight, they were weird movies to watch back to back in his filmography, because one of them was Secret Honor, which is like his by far his most minimal like movie. There's like one character in the entire thing. And then Shortcuts, which is like second only to Nashville. He's like very well known for these like dozens and dozens of characters in his films, and just like crisscrossing dialogue, chaos, like in a way like Tati with Conversations, I guess, like in that way that it's like totally like all over the place, and you're just like watching chaos happen. Yeah, so at first I watched Secret Honor, which is Philip Baker Hall, who is amazing and is not in enough movies. You may know him from Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson. He's the game show host who's like.
He was in Paul Thomas Anderson's first movie.
Yeah, Hard 8.
Yeah,
he was in Hard 8 too.
Hard 8 as well, Sydney, and he's great. And in this, I think it's what year is it? It's 84. He looks exactly the same age. He looks so haggard.
He's been like 75 for like.
He has a very old face.
Life.
Yeah, I can't even imagine him younger.
I know. I've like tried. I've tried to like search on Google for like pictures of him in his 20s, and they won't show him to me. Yeah, he's on there, and he plays Richard Nixon, who is like post Watergate. Yeah. He's like post Watergate, like super depressed in his house late at night, and he's just getting like, he has a gun and he has a tape recorder and a bottle of whiskey, and he's just getting progressively more and more drunk the whole time, while giving himself like voice memos about the book that he's going to write about himself, or someone's going to write.
You'd have thought he would have sworn off tape recorders after
and he's like
after Watergate,
like just vomiting up all of like the bile that is Richard Nixon throughout the whole movie. Like, if anyone were to like hear this, which we as an audience are privy to, we would be shocked. But there's literally no other characters. There's no other setting. It is based off of like a play, so it is like a monologue. But Altman, it's still not. It's interesting because it's still not just filming a play. There's some very interesting like cinematography choices and like weird zoom-ins on like security camera footage of him like in his house and stuff. So it's very interesting. I'm not like a Nixon like expert or something, and you don't really need to be, which you would think you would to like watch an hour and a half movie where it's just Nixon talking. But really, like, what it's about is like, you don't really give a shit, because Philip Baker Hall could be playing any character. Just like listening to him like go like this is just really amazing. And then to follow that up, I watched Shortcuts, which I hadn't seen in a long time, which used to be like one of my favorite movies, and it still is pretty high up there. But again, that's like totally contrasts with. It's based on the writing of Raymond Carver. They're all like various short stories that make up the ensemble, and they're all like intercutting and interweaving these short stories. Definitely in Robert Altman fashion, where he's, taking liberties, letting actors improvise. It has like an amazing cast, like Tim Robbins is in it. Is it Tim or Tom? Shawshank Redemption? Yeah, Tim. He's in it. There's now I'm blanking on everybody, but it's a great cast. It's a seriously great cast, and Robert Downey Jr. plays like a really weird, like he's totally coked out, like as a character and in real life, definitely. And he's beautiful. I mean, if you've never seen young Robert Downey Jr., it's like outrageous how what a good looking person he is. But yeah, the eyes are ridiculous. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely less again, second to Nashville in the way that like the sheer amount of like amazing stuff going on, and second to Nashville in the way that it's like maybe a little less focused, but it's still very interesting to watch like someone like somehow figure out how to interweave all these stories together. You can definitely see a through line with Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia through the whole thing. You can tell he was a huge fan. And yeah, that's I had a great time watching Shortcuts.
It's pretty wild that you ended up double like featuring like structurally like opposite movies. Like one's literally like a bottle episode or a bottle film, and then the other one's just like this massive like multi like character like kind of thing.
Yeah, Shortcuts I really needed at the time. I was like, I won't get too hard into this, but I was going through this whole thing where one of my family members like had COVID, and I needed to I didn't know if I had COVID or something, so I was like quarantining in our like, we were moving right now, and I slept in our old apartment that had like hardly any furniture and stuff, just to like make sure my partner didn't get COVID and stuff. And I don't have COVID, thank God. But during those nights I watched Shortcuts, and it was like, oh, all these people while I'm alone, I can at least watch people.
Was Secret Honor in that as well? You were just like, I need somebody in the room with me. Here's Richard Nixon.
That might have made even more sense. It might have made me like even more like depressed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think Richard Nixon would help.
Richard Nixon drunk in an empty apartment. And
I think Altman's funny because he's known for like those big ensemble movies, but then his movies that aren't the big ensemble movies tend to be extremely insular, like Three Women or Images.
Oh my God, Images.
Like just these like,
yeah,
just these movies that are like extremely lonely, where characters like have trouble getting out of their own heads. And then his other movies are like, we have 50 main characters and they're all in this big old community with one another and constantly interacting with one another. I think it's funny that he just like swings in both of those directions.
I've been staring at, I haven't seen it yet or seen it before, but I've been staring at The Long Goodbye, which is on a couple different streaming services.
Speaking of another Paul Thomas Anderson inspiration, like Inherent Vice owes a ton to Long Goodbye.
And Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah. I think it's on Amazon Prime. I've been staring at that one for a while. I might have to watch it.
It's
good.
So awesome.
Elliot Gould is really good, because he normally is really good.
Just to get a Miller Lite and watch Long Goodbye.
Really? Okay. Well, I can do that. All right. I'm going to talk about my movie. We'll go ahead and just jump into we'll jump into the big stuff. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we will be back to talk about The Color of Pomegranates after this.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is your favorite Filipino podcaster, Jessica Carr. I'm here to let you know about a couple of things that Cinematary offers that you might not know about. First, if you're a fan of what Cinematary is doing, please consider joining us on Patreon. Remember when we weren't clamoring for your dollars? Well, now we're just clamoring for 5 of your dollars. So please help us and donate to our Patreon, and then you'll get exclusive content from our staff, including our Film Theory and Chill series, where a panel takes a piece of theory each month and deconstructs it before diving into whatever topic is on their mind from the past week. The $5 each month is investment in the website and the podcast, and it goes solely to paying our writers for the reviews each week, so please consider doing it. It's only $5. If you missed an episode of Cinematary or a piece of writing we've had, you should consider signing up for our free newsletter. Each Sunday, we send out a note with the latest podcast episode, piece of Patreon Patreon content and the last 2 reviews that we've written at cinematary.com. It's perfect for those of you who are interested in what's happening, and it makes sure that you don't miss a single Cinematary review. Finally, the easiest thing that you can do to help us is to please give us a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever else you're using to listen to the show. This helps us get more eyeballs and ears on the podcast and the website, and it helps the people know about Cinematary, which is really what we're here for. So to recap, consider donating to our Patreon, sign up for the free newsletter, and give us a rating or review. We would really appreciate if you could do these things. Thank you for listening, and now back to the show.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 367 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch All Movies series with 1969's The Color of Pomegranates. Written and directed, and excuse me, I'm just going to butcher all these Russian names. Written and directed by Sergei Parajanov. The film stars Safiko Chiaruli, Melkin Aleksanyan, Vilian Galstayan, and Gorgi Gagechkori. The avant-garde film depicts the life of the 18th century Armenian poet and musician Sayat Nova, portraying events in the life of the artist from childhood up to his death. The movie addresses in particular his relationships with women, including his muse. Parajanov, the director, said his inspiration was, quote, the Armenian illuminated miniature, and that he, quote, wanted to create that inner dynamic that comes from inside the picture, the forms, and the drama, the drama of the color. He also described this film as a series of Persian miniatures. Born Arutin Sayadian, 18th century Armenian poet Sayat Nova, whose pen name means King of Songs, served as the initial inspiration for the film. Sayat Nova was an asaj, a troubadour whose verses were set to music that he played on a lute. Because he wrote in 3 languages spoken, Armenian, Azerbaijani, and Georgian. He has long been revered as a symbol of brotherhood in the region, as illustrated by this stamp commemorating the 250th anniversary of his birth in 1712. The director saw himself as a spiritual kin to Sayat Nova, and believed that his ties to multicultural Transcaucasia made him the ideal artist to bring the poet's life to the screen. For The Color of Pomegranates, the director eschewed traditional biopic narrative, which is an understatement, and focused on visual and sonic details. He stated that he wished to, quote, show the world in which the Asaj lived, the sources that nourished his poetry, national architecture, folk art, nature, daily life, and music will play a large role in the film's decisions, or pictorial decisions. He placed a lot of importance on filming at historical locations that had been important to Sayat Nova's life, such as Hakpat Monastery, where the poet had lived as a monk in his later years. Though many of the religious props seen in the film were rare artifacts, Parajanov added his own personal touches. He designed a number of the costumes, including the green dress worn by the angel at the film's conclusion. The film was originally going to be called Sayat Nova, but Gervor Karian, the chair of the studio in Armenia, decided too many liberties had been taken with the subject's biography. Because of its displeasure with the film's unorthodox take on his life, Gaskino, which is the studio name, refused to let it be shown abroad. It wasn't until the mid-1970s, while the director Parajanov was imprisoned on charges of homosexuality and dissemination of pornography, charges that many insist were politically motivated by his association with Ukrainian dissidents and public criticism of various Soviet authorities, that the film appeared in the West in a bootleg print. This breakthrough happened after film scholars such as Herbert Marshall championed the work and protested his incarceration. The one review I could find was from a filmmaker, Mikhail Veritov, who said, beside the film language suggested by Griffith and Eisenstein, the world cinema has not discovered anything revolutionarily new until The Color of Pomegranates, not counting the generally unaccepted language of Boomwell. So on that note, I'm excited to get into this discussion. We have two who have seen this before, and then two who have, this is the first time, including myself. But yeah, Nazeeh, I was gonna go ahead and start with you. You had seen this before, so what's been your experience so far with The Color of Pomegranates?
So second time around, just as incomprehensible as the first time, to be honest.
I can't imagine it gets better. I mean, like in terms of like the visuals, it probably gets better, but in terms of like understanding, I don't think it probably.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if that caused them to be insecure, which caused them to like censor it, because I can see them thinking, okay, if I don't understand this, then I might be missing something that's like offensive to the state, the culture, or whatever. And what's really depressing is they'd probably love like modern day biopics. They'd be like, yeah, these are great.
That's a double feature.
Because they're like super by the numbers. They go through a person's life. They're really sterile. They wouldn't have cut a single thing. I mean, they would have given like Bohemian Rhapsody. Like that'd be an ideal movie for them, you know.
They'd be big fans of Bohemian Rhapsody, Darkest Hour.
Right.
Yeah, they would be like, why didn't you just dress up like Gary Oldman? You know.
Yeah, just like all these really like by the number, biopics. But it's funny that like between this and Andrei Rublev, like the Soviets are super, super good at like mythologizing their history and like faithfully depicting it. And they're very, very nationalistic.
And doing so through artists, too. Like, both this and Andrei Rublev are about artists.
Yep. Yeah. And according to the Soviets, and as far as I'm concerned, like, the best way to make a biopic is to not present the people in their life and the events that happened, but to present, like, the entire world in which the artist lived. And like present the entire like environment that they were like inhabiting, because that's really like what forms a person. But it's very hard to do if you don't have a plot that is going anywhere, right? Because there's no plot and there's no like place to go, and that's very difficult to like get into the rhythm of. I think when as like a casual moviegoer, or when you just start to watch art films. Like, I love it a lot. So I watched this like 6 years ago. I was just getting into film, and it kind of just washed over me. And I knew it was amazing, but I didn't know why. And now when I watch it, it's one of those things where it's like, there's nothing really to get other than being someone who's not from this country or culture, and you're simply observing it. And so it's not anything that's too deep for a person. At least for me, it's just like, I'm a Westerner. I'm from the West, and so like of course it's gonna be foreign and like alien to me. But I think the best movies that are like really artistic and have a lot going on can be enjoyed regardless of context and history, right? I could never know a single thing about this guy's life, and the movie would be incredible every time I watch it, no matter what. But if you want to get into like the context and like the history and like what's going on, like it's rewarding in that capacity too. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Seth, you'd seen this before. What was it like coming back to it for this?
Oh, it just slays. It's just, man, it's so amazing. It stands on its own. I can't imagine seeing this at the time. It is like like you said, Nazeeh, it's like being. I think it is like the thrill of being in another country or something that you've never been to, for a Westerner, or anyone outside of this culture or this history, is just sort of like it. I could imagine it being daunting for like a first time viewer Westerner, but I would encourage viewers to go into it like you would going into another country and being like, you don't get this, you don't know about this, but it's like it's good for you to like just kind of bathe yourself and go head first into this, and just like it reminds me of like modernist writers or like a Joycean or like almost like a Pynchon kind of like layer cake where you can like just be you can enjoy it. The trick is that you can enjoy it. You can get through books like those or movies like this and not have a clue of like what exactly you saw. But if you wanted to, you could go through like every scene. Like I think we were talking earlier, there's a Criterion special feature on like the DVD or on the channel that goes through a lot of this and explains a lot of things. But like each scene feels like there's like several layers of symbolism happening. You could read like several books about it, which is very exciting, I think. But again, that's not the prerequisite for enjoyment. It is like the colors are great. The like choreography is amazing. Just like on a basic level of just like the only thing I could really like. It was interesting to hear that quote from a early reviewer that you had, Zach. The only thing I could like, I just assume he hasn't seen Kenneth Anger. That's the only thing I could really compare this to is like, which is kind of bonkers that like Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome came out before this. Kudos to Kenneth Anger as usual, but that's the only thing I could like draw a comparison to as far as like a contemporary film doing this sort of like moving art pieces rather than actual movie dialogue scenes.
Yeah, the movie that came to mind for me watching this, and obviously this is after this, but like Derek Jarman's movies, like specifically Last of England, feels a lot like this movie. And I would be shocked if this wasn't like an inspiration for the sort of thing that he does.
I was thinking of Caravaggio, which we talked about.
Although I think that's like maybe a little bit more narrative than this one.
It's much more narrative, but I think it kind of it has those sequences where it's like set up like a piece of like a painting or a piece of art where it just feels like it's that, but like alive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sequences like that.
Well, I guess it's also like
I think that's a great comparison. I like that reminded me that like that was one of the things that I liked about this that is totally Jarman-like, that like for all its hype to being like an incomprehensible, very artistic film, it has like a weird punkiness, like kind of like there's kind of an irreverent, like the way the cuts work, the way the costumes work sometimes. There is sort of like a like ragtag sort of not giving a fuck kind of feeling that almost like Caravaggio has, like on purpose.
Well, and even like just being kind of agnostic to the actual facts of the subject's life, I think is like, I don't think it's irreverent in the sense it's like, you know, tarnishing the legacy of these artists, but it is irreverent in the sense of like just we were talking about how it's not there to gratify like the person's biography. It's more there to be resonant with the larger ideas of their career. Or I assume I don't know a thing about this Armenian troubadour, so I'm not going to claim that I do. But like to me, it feels like the resonance of the movie is that it is in conversation with the larger resonance of his importance and career, rather than like we want to kind of relive like through like an audience surrogate character, like what it was like to be around that person, like which is like what I feel like a lot of biopics are doing is like I wanted to be in the room when that happened. And
I never understand like why modern biopics just like insist on being linear, because it's almost like a waste of the medium of film. Like the whole like beauty is that you can cut to like the most exciting, the most important moments, right? And so,
Well, I gotta say that there is like that trope in biopics where it's like, Dewey's got to sit down and think about his whole life.
it's true. It's true. I guess it's like a very simplistic, like
it is. Well, it's very simplistic,
non-linear kind of structure. But because like life in its totality is like pretty boring. Like instead, like Persianov like takes these like tableaus and like just presents them. And I was talking to Zach about this earlier, and it's like a cumulative effect where it just like it like builds like little by little, and you just get an overall picture like at the end of it, and that's just more interesting. That's more engaging to watch.
Well, I was gonna say, just to your point, Michael. I think it's much more effective to like try to evoke what the person like what he was trying to pass on, or what he was trying to kind of evoke through his own art, through the biopic, rather than just going, it doesn't need to be like a let's experience what it would be like to that's why I kind of roll my eyes at something like Darkest Hour, because it's literally just like pornography for World War II fans and Winston Churchill fans to like see a scene, something that they've read about in books and heard about in other things, like acted out. And I'm like, but you're not going to gain anything from that. You're just seeing something to kind of get off on it almost, when if you really want to like understand this person, like you got like something like this movie where you're not getting there's nothing that maybe you'll latch onto because it's something you'll recognize, but you'll be enveloped in like what this person's mind was like. And I feel like that's just much more effective even for movies.
Well, and it limits the movie too, like when you're telling like the story of Winston Churchill or Johnny Cash or like whatever, and you're sticking to like a literal interpretation of their life, it like limits what you can do. Whereas in this movie, like when the guy is born, there's a whole recitation of like the passage of creation in Genesis, and like all these like free associative like religious images there, and like that is so much more interesting and like rich than like to see him born and like whatever happens in early life in like a literal way. Like there's like the movie just opens up once you're allowing yourself to not worry about like kind of walking through literal events, and instead you can just like, you can have an angel show up or stuff like that. Like it's just, just so off the wall, in a really engaging way.
Yeah, I agree with Zach that it is so like, it is about like as a viewer feeling what it's like to be this poet, like living inside his head. Like you might not be religious, but like through this you kind of like see, like obviously he wasn't like hallucinating like all the time, but like this is in a way like the reverence that is had for religious iconography, and like the belief that like angels are there is like literally shown in this movie as he goes through his life, which is a really like way more fascinating way of doing it, rather than just like having a character like a person playing him and having a monologue about like what he believes and how he feels. Like,
yeah, or just affirming like what you would expect this figure that to say. Nazeeh, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, it's related to what all of you are saying. It's so much of like what affects us in our life and what shapes and molds us are just like things that we experience either emotionally or psychologically, and that is what I feel like a lot of Soviet filmmakers were really sensitive to. Like the physical events that happen to us are like much less formative than like our inner thoughts or our like childhood memories. There is a scene early on that I think is just so striking, where he's a child and he's being told to read, and he's on like this like stone bridge like outside, and there's all these books open around him, and the wind is blowing it, and it's beautiful because it's a natural thing that occurs. It's wind, but they look like ghosts. Like, it looks like ghosts are turning the pages of these books, and he's just like surrounded by like all of these like phantoms of like Georgian, Albanian history. And like, again, like these Eastern European countries are just so in tune with their country's history. Like it's very much built into like their interiority. And I don't know if that's like a result of like living under like the Soviet Union. I don't know if it's like a propaganda thing, but it's very uniform and very lived in a way that I really enjoy experiencing.
Yeah, I mean it's there's something about like the reverence of not just like when when you say the history, it's not even like the like moments or stories around them. It's like the stories feel like embedded into the land itself. It's like they're engaged with like that culture. It's not just like, I think I think a lot of American culture is just it's so embedded in like mythology. It's so embedded in like the stories and the figures that we recognize. And in this, it's like you have that because, like Seth was talking about, you kind of have like this iconography, this religious iconography that pops up a lot, but it's always in service of like the kind of embedded, cultural, like what is around you that you can't see kind of. I think that reverence is what's kind of in tune with this movie.
I wonder if that's like a consequence. I mean, this is maybe like BS, like psychologizing of a national identity, but like the United States has no history, like in the sense of like a European country would, like it, there, for like the majority of the people who live in the United States, like, you're not indigenous to the region, like at least like, a couple generations back, like the country itself, like the topography of the land is only associated with like the last like 300 years or whatever in our like popular consciousness, right? There's no deep root because like that was like consciously like genocided and erased. And whereas like the experience of living, I've often thought about really this true. Like because like national identity for the United States is kind of like inherently like white supremacist in the sense of like
imperialism.
Yeah, it's because the entire country's project was that. But if you lived in like, I don't know, I think about Ireland a lot, because like, O'Malley is Irish, of course. But like I think about like there's a national identity that kind of transcends like a state, like an individual state there, because your tie to the land is not simply a function of that state existing. And I think maybe like a film like this, another, a film like Andrei Rublev or Mirror, the Tarkovsky movies that deal a lot with history contend with that as well, because you see like the state power that's, in charge of like this land or where the family is living shifts over time. And so it's not like, obviously like government is an important part of a person's identity, but it doesn't have to, like there's a broader canvas there with countries that aren't like settler countries, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also have what's interesting about the film and kind of what it does is it also has, you have these you see similar faces over and over again. You kind of see people playing different, like they're playing different characters, but it's the same actor. And it's kind of, you kind of have like that continuation, that familiarity, because you see the same person playing three different characters. It kind of creates this kind of binded connection.
Yeah, I think that woman plays like five characters in the movie, mm-hmm. which I love when they do that. If they do it like well.
yeah, it's like a. It reminds me of Osamu Tezuka, who is he's like the godfather of manga, who invented like Astro Boy, and throughout he regards his like the way he draws certain characters, they are like members of his cast, and they are used, like you will find like in other books like Astro Boy is like he's playing a different character or something, but they are all like parts of like different parts of like the same archetype, and I wonder if that's what's going on here. Like there's like the old man, there's the woman, the angel. Like it's kind of interesting to see that. That's the only other place I've seen it like that.
Yeah, I think it's just like, you know, it's just, again, going back to like, it's just kind of this connective tissue of like this, it's one, it's just familiar, and two, it's kind of like, yeah, like they're carrying over to each part or each step in this man's life. Like it's just something that he kind of goes back to. It's just like this familiar face that he always, that's kind of just always there. And he also is not only seeing like familiar faces of like different people, but he's also, you know, engaging with like his younger self and his middle-aged self and things like that. You know, when he gets old, you know, near the end of the movie, he's like seeing those as well. It's just kind of like, that's the movie, like the movie's so interesting because it kind of feels like it's, you know, because there's no like narrative structure, there's no like first, second, and third act. It feels like everything's just kind of like on top of each other, and like, I don't know, to me that's kind of fascinating. You know, it's like there's a linear order that you kind of, because he starts as a child and he ends as an old man, but like at the same time you could probably pick up anywhere, and it's all about like the experience along the way.
Yeah. I use this term lightly, but I think it is applicable here. It is very much structured like poetry, you know, like because it kind of just jumps throughout time and like emotion, and that's I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't unintentional on, you know, his part. I'd be very interested to see what the poetry of this man is like. Just for like a reference as far as you know, how the film about him was made.
I have to assume.
Yeah, and
sorry.
I mean, given he's I was just gonna say, given he's a troubadour, I wonder if there's like recordings of like reenactments of his music or whatever.
I assume that's what a lot of the music is, and I just like, I also assume like a lot of the imagery, like while some of it is like nationalistic, like historical Armenian imagery, I wonder often, I'm sure some of it is directly from poems, and maybe not always the poems that are being quoted throughout the film, but yeah, I'd be curious about that. I wonder if a lot of the images that we see have root in the poems.
I think so. I mean, it seemed just from like doing cursory research on like what the director was trying to do. Like he was very, I mean, like I said, he felt like he was the direct heir of this person to like tell this story. So I think he was very like in tune with the poets, with the poems of this poet and like what he was trying to kind of convey. I do want to spend some time talking a little bit about just, you know, images or scenes from this film. You know, one that kind of stuck out to me was you have that sequence where he's middle-aged and he's like moving through the room, and the room is just covered in sheep. And there's like there's the old man on the bed, and he's like going to like put the cloth, you know, he's putting the cloth over the old man, but just like, not even like just like how impressive that, you know, just visually that is, but like I was just thinking of just like the filming of that. Like, I mean, that room is just covered in sheep.
Is there also like, or is this a different scene? Is there also like a sermon going on or something like that? Yeah.
And there's like there's a sermon going on, and there's just this man laying in the middle of the room on like this really bright red bed, and there's just sheep everywhere, and I'm just like, how did you shoot that scene? Like, that seems insane, just in terms of the filmmaking.
You know what other scene made me think about? Like, how the fuck did he do that? It's an exterior shot of like the castle, and the entire background is like uniformly black.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Like how did you light that? Where did the camera go? Like it looked fake whether it was day or night. Like how do you capture that type of like completely even lighting? Like there wasn't any anything out of shape, and it looked very like dollhouse like.
Yeah, there was a lot of sequences in this that reminded me of a film we talked about, Michael. We talked about, I think you were on that episode last year, but it's an animated movie, The Son of the White Mare. Just in terms of like how like
I need to see that. I have it.
Just how every frame is just like
but there was sequences in this that felt like almost like a live action version of that, where it just kind of had like this like ethereal quality to it, like what you're describing, Nazeeh, like this, just like you're like, where like this came out of like some like spiritual
like
discovery.
It's like you shot in outer space, you know, where like physics isn't the same. And it's one of the best uses of negative space that I think he uses in the movie, because there's lots of negative space, and I can never get enough of it. Like, especially if like the color schemes are like as dramatic as the negative space. I think that's really, really dramatic. It's really dramatic.
It's incredibly good. One of the things that stood out to me, like as far as like sensory details go, is like, obviously the visuals are incredible, but the soundscape that the movie creates is amazing. And actually one of the reasons, I'm pretty sure I put this on our ballot for Young Critics, but one of the reasons why I was interested in this movie to begin with is that probably like 6 or 7 years ago, the musician Nicholas Jarre created like a companion album to this, where you were supposed to be able to play the album over the movie. And I didn't know what the movie was at the time. Like, that's how I found out about it. And I was like, what could this interesting movie be like that has this like...
Did you do that to watch?
No, I didn't, and I'm really glad I didn't, because the movie itself is like this really just mesmerizing soundscape. Like, there's of course like the music that kind of comes in and out, but also a lot of the rest of the movie is like just rustling and like tapping and like, you know, kind of like this like ASMR kind of thing. And the Nicholas Jarre album is
very textural.
Yeah, it's super like
very textural.
The texture of it is just super amazing, and I listened to it on headphones as well because it was on my laptop where I was watching it, and it was just like a really amazing like aural experience. And I'm not sure if it would be improved with the Nicholas Jarre album, which also does a lot of that same stuff, but I kind of assumed it was going to be a silent film at first since he had a companion piece to it, but I can't imagine honestly watching this movie without its sound.
All the men stepping on food.
The grapes, like the grape press.
Anytime like like feet and food, you know, it's very I can't think of the word, but like you feel it. You very much feel it.
Well, it opens, you have that scene, you have the person stepping on the grapes, but then you have just like the kind of, you don't see anybody crushing them, but like you have the pomegranates that are just being like crushed, and you kind of can just like hear like the crunch and like see it kind of ooze out.
Well, and later on, aren't they eating pomegranates? Yeah. It's just this like really like, just the sound of it is just incredible.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is definitely textural. It's like it is like such a wonderful image, and it's like a full package, which is like, similar to like, I think it's in the same sequence where we see those books like just flapping and things like that. There's a scene of like it's like a close up of this stack of books, and water is being poured down them, and it's like it's coming down the pages, and they're like squishing the pages, so the books have become like spongy, and it's just so satisfying for some strange reason.
Or there's the scene where the guy, it's very very late in the film where the poet is like in it's almost like a prison, and there's the guy, and he has like the big jugs, and he's just like pouring the jugs, and you can just like hear like the liquid. I don't even know what the liquid is, kind of coming out of it. No, it's there's a lot of those moments where you're just like,
it's just about the sounds.
The sounds. I also like that there is like dialogue in it. Like you have that one scene which is I think my favorite part of the whole movie, where the old woman is talking about going to the bathhouse. And it's just like there's like this little spot where she's just talking about going to this bathhouse, and then her husband's just like, why would you say that we went to a bathhouse? And she just continues on with her story.
It's like this weird succession, like, we went to the bathhouse, and then you told them that we went to the bathhouse, and you shouldn't tell them that we went to the bathhouse, and then we went and got a chicken, and then we, like, it's just like this weird anecdote that doesn't
have anything to do with anything. Yeah, it's just...
Yeah, they're even talking to Nova. We don't even know, like...
Yeah, no, it's you just kind of have like these sequences where they like whenever they do talk, it has really nothing to do with like where we're at in this wherever. Like it has nothing to do with what's happening. It's just like we're just gonna start talking about something. You have like it happens a lot like in the last part of the movie where like the older women are just kind of talking about the kind of rituals that are taking place, because I think it's at the same time when they're killing the sheep to like they have the sheep like strung up, and they're talking about like, yeah, we're gonna cook these sheep or whatever. They're like, yeah, we're like gonna do this with the sheep. They're just like, it has,
and they do,
yeah, and it has nothing to do with like, it's not moving it's not moving any plot, it's not moving any narrative, it has nothing to do with the poet. It's just these old ladies talking about cooking this sheep, and I'm like, all right.
That's definitely a content warning. Yeah, there's some heavy animal. They kill some animals and eat them. They at least eat them, I guess. But yeah, it's intense.
Yeah. The last thing I did want to kind of talk about as we kind of wrap up is, you mentioned, I think we all kind of mentioned, like, it is a movie that you definitely have to prepare yourself a little bit for mentally as you like jump into it, because it's not traditional in any way. It is kind of very unique and singular in its own way. And so for you all, as you were kind of tackling it for the first time, I mean, did you have to kind of put yourself in how did you set yourself up to kind of watch the movie? Because I think it is one that you have to kind of prepare yourself for a little bit mentally.
I was honestly like, life has been super stressful for me recently because I'm like a public school teacher, and like, yada yada yada, all the stuff you see in the news about like that and COVID. But so like I was sitting down to watch this movie. I'm like, I'm so tired and stressed, and I just need to like focus on like a movie to just like take my mind off of like other stuff. And then like this ended up being a really perfect movie for that, because it just pulls you in with all like the sensory details that we've talked about, and there's not like a lot of responsibility for your brain as far as like stringing together a plot if you don't want to. And so that was kind of like, I don't know, it seems weird to say like I'm going to unwind with some like experimental Russian cinema, or I guess Armenian Russian cinema, but like it did definitely help me like to unwind, and I found it just extremely like just soothing.
No, I totally agree with that. Like, I can't stress enough that this is sort of the case with some experimental media, like a good chunk of it actually. Like the misconception is that like you have to go into it after doing like a bunch of research and like being like just so very like prepared. Like something like this really is just like, it's as complicated as you want to make it. It can be as complicated as like a month-long like scholarly research, like watching it 3 times and reading about it. Or like, if you want, it's just like amazing textures and colors to experience like when you're stressed out.
Yeah, I'd say like within 5 minutes of watching this the first time I saw it, I very much accepted that I'm just gonna experience what's happening to me, and there's nothing to follow or get. And like regardless of like what I'm not comprehending, like the vision is undeniable, the images are undeniable, the craft is undeniable. I really like the quote from Perjanov about like how he really felt like he was the guy to do this movie about this poet, because that's how you have to show up to make a movie like this. You can't haphazardly throw this together. Like, you got to really believe in the images you're putting together. And no matter who you are, I think that like if you just like accept what you're watching, like you'll see that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that, to add to what everybody said, like you do. I think it is. I think it's one of those movies that kind of can become. You can make it daunting if you want to, but I'm like, I think you just kind of have to experience and go in and take it at face value. Like, just take it at what value, like, it's not really that complicated. You just have to kind of accept what it's giving you. Don't perceive something on top of what it is. But yeah, I don't know. If you're willing to do that, I think this is definitely one to check out, because it's an experience. It's an experience unlike anything you've ever seen. We've said that a bunch so far in this conversation.
Yeah, and I personally think all the best art does that. It operates on like both levels of like super dense, referential, heady, or just like sensory, like straightforward, like, experience.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I believe that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Also, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinematary. Thank you so much to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Christina Daughtry, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1971's Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, which is going to be getting a release on Criterion at the end of the month, so perfect timing for that. So until then, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.